Hey everybody, it's Allie, and welcome to our Y&R Chat for Sunday, June 7th, 2020. For me, the Abbott family week was more like Traci week for me. I just love her, and I love that I had a chance this week to watch her evolve as a character. I mean, she's on the show in present day, but she was always kind of a background character to me because by the time I started watching the show, she wasn't really on the front burner. So this was a really great opportunity for me to consider her character in a way that I hadn't before. 1991. It was the day of Traci's re-wedding to Brad. And who was there in the bridal suite with her? Just as we talked about last week, it was Mamie. Mamie was there for all of the important dates for John's children. It was sweet Mamie there with Traci, encouraging her and being happy for her. And Traci even acknowledged in that scene to Mamie directly that she was the one who raised her since she was 7 years old. Mamie was the mother of the Abbott household. Mamie was as much a member of the family as Dina. I mean, where was Dina on the day of Traci's re-wedding to Brad in 1991? Dina was having tea with Catherine over at the Catherine Chancellor Mansion, trying to conceive some way to snatch John back away from Jill, which was delightful, by the way. I can't knock it because I also really enjoyed it. Dina was so elegant looking with her elegant hair in an updo, and she was wearing a printed silk blouse with fins all over it. I mean, she had various fins printed all over her blouse. If that doesn't scream class, I surely don't know what does. Fans! Oh. And then Catherine was there in her green blazer, just chitty chitty chat chat, catty catty chat chat. Ooh. I loved that scene. I loved those moments. And one thing I keep forgetting to mention about Catherine, and it's come up week after week, and I haven't had a chance to say it, so I'm excited to say it now. Catherine Chancellor, that woman knew how to hold a teacup. She knew how to hold a teacup and swirl it around for dramatic effect and then take a sip while giving eyes over the rim. I just thought she's done it in a couple of different scenes, and I thought, oh, that is so classic Catherine. Catherine and her teacup, her probably very expensive china teacup. Ladies having tea. How very upper crust of them. Do you think that it was hibiscus tea? Oh, I would bet my life on it. It was Dina's favorite, you know. Did you know? Oh, yes. They were so classy. And now let's contrast Dina's kind of old world elegance and class with Jill's outrageous 90s pink, blue, and yellow wedding getup. That's the only thing to call it, a getup. But that was some like cutting edge 1990s attire right there. I mean, she was probably the height of modern fashion right there in that hat. That hat! Oh my gosh. That hat had volume. It was big. I mean, John had to probably stand a foot away from Jill just so he wouldn't get whacked in the face with her hat. Oh, I love those hats with the veil that comes down over the front. Those are really cool. And I mean, it was a cool throwback outfit. I liked looking at it. And I guess something about the two outfits really highlighted the contrast between Dina and Jill for me. I think that they actually made really good rivals because they had these contrasting styles. And I like the idea of them fighting over John. I mean, they made really good foils for each other in a similar dynamic to what Jill had with Catherine. I just wish that we could have seen more Dina versus Jill over the years. There were so many missed opportunities, really. I mean, it could have been done any time along the way, and we really didn't have that much Dina until more recent years, and it's hard to understand why, looking back at those scenes at Traci and Brad's wedding, because Dina fit this show like a glove. They could have just done so much more. But I am slowly coming to the realization that John Abbott probably just had not good taste in women. He might possibly have even had terrible taste in women. Dina had 3 of his kids, then floozied around on him, then left him with the family and left the country. She split town. She was never available. She totally abandoned John and the family. And then Jill wasn't really that much better. I mean, Jill slept with his son. That's pretty bad. And although I wholly believe that Gloria loved John. She loved John truly and deeply, and I believe that John was the love of Gloria's life. But Gloria was also always scrambling. She was always trying to keep a secret from him. The relationship it needed more honesty, I think, because I believe that John would have probably forgiven her anything. And yet she was always kind of choosing to lie and hide, I think because she felt the relationship was so precious and she didn't want to screw it up. But I mean, ultimately their marriage it didn't last very long, and I mean, maybe they could have had longevity. All soap relationships go through trials and tribulations and lies, but the path up to Gloria, which included Dina and Jill and a host of other women, I mean, a lot of it was in John's romantic life was lukewarm. I mean, he had that relationship we saw a few weeks ago with Ellen Winters, and I don't know, there was not a whole lot of chemistry there. I mean, he was involved with Gina for a little bit, not a whole lot of chemistry there. And I don't even want to think about John and Leanna Love. I just don't even want to go there because I refuse to accept they were ever together even for a little bit. The point is, the point that I'm trying to get to here is, Mamie is the woman that John should have married. For all we know, Mamie could have been the love of his life. Mamie never lied to him. Mamie took care of him. Mamie was the real mother of his children. And I was really moved by the scenes in Traci's bridal suite when Mamie was telling Traci how she had this feeling that everything was going to work out for her and Brad. But the writing was on the wall. It was all over the wall when it came to Traci and Brad's marriage. It was so clear that that marriage was going to fail. We saw in the 1991 episode that there was a little something going on between Brad and Traci's sister, Ashley. So after Traci and Brad had gone through their first marriage and were in the process of divorcing, Ashley had done some heavy flirting with Brad in order to try to make Traci jealous, in order to try to make Traci want to get back together with Brad. But it had the effect of Ashley and Brad developing real feelings for each other. And as we saw in that episode, Traci was very insecure about that. Traci was very insecure about a lot of things. I think Traci did not trust herself, and I'm sure she didn't trust in herself. And it was probably not easy to do that, considering John was over here in the corner whispering to Ashley. Not even whispering, no. He was publicly telling Ashley that she was my beauty. Always lavishing this compliment on Ashley, while Traci was over here looking in the mirror, feeling like she was never going to measure up to her beautiful, amazing sister. What an awful feeling to know that you're not really the preferred daughter. And not only that your father doesn't prefer you, but the men in your life don't prefer you. Because, I mean, Traci's marriage to Brad didn't last, and Brad did eventually hook up with Ashley. Brad and Ashley were together for a long time. So if Traci thought there was something going on between Brad and Ashley, she was right. She was validated. And then Traci actually decided to get out of Genoa City. I mean, she met Steve while she was working as a novelist, and they moved to New York City together with little Colleen, and it seemed like Traci was really happy. She found someone who wanted her. We saw in the 1999 episode where Traci came back to Genoa City for Jack's Abbott family surprise party, where he was revealing that Jabot was back in the hands of the family. And Traci seemed really happy there with Steve. And one thing that really struck me from the 99 episode, and especially since we saw a 2019 episode on Friday, Traci reminded me a lot of Abby. I see a very strong resemblance between those two with their personalities, and I never really much made the connection before, but I think that Abby is a lot more like Traci than she is like her mother, Ashley. There's like almost a goofiness about Abby that reminds me a little bit of Traci's goofiness and giggliness, whereas Ashley is far more serious. Ashley's not, but Abby and Traci kind of are. There's a goofiness there. But there's also an insecurity there, right? I mean, maybe the goofiness is there to hide some of the insecurities, because Abby never really feels comfortable in any of her relationships, just like Traci. Abby is always the forgotten family member, just like Traci. Abby doesn't fit in with the family businesses, just like Traci. And Abby had to learn to go her own way to forge her own career, just like Traci. It breaks my heart that it was in the year 2000 as Traci had actually found her happiness. She'd actually found a man who loved her. And then she found out that Steve had an affair on her. Great. Again, doesn't help with the insecurity. And so Traci returned to Genoa City in 2000 with teen Colleen. And teen Colleen was so great. She was a good girl in the episode that we saw, but she eventually turned into a little troublemaker, and it was great. We could talk about that in a whole nother Y&R chat. But back in Genoa City, Colleen was feeling betrayed by what had happened with Steve. Colleen saw Steve as a father figure, but Brad was Colleen's biological father, and so Colleen wanted her mother and her father, Brad and Traci, to be reunited. But Brad was involved with and living with Aunt Ashley. I mean, they had their whole own family going on. Brad had adopted Abby. So even though Victor was Abby's biological father, Abby saw Brad as her dad. And now Traci and Colleen come into the mix, and it kind of creates a tangled, kind of trashy situation with Traci and Ashley, who both have children by the same man, although granted, Abby wasn't Brad's biological father, but he was her father. And now Ashley and Traci are living with Brad, and their children with Brad are there. So it is understandable to me why Ashley was so uncomfortable at the Abbott pool party, but wasn't it interesting the way that John pulled Traci aside to let her know that the whole living situation had become uncomfortable for Ashley? Like, Traci and Colleen had their lives upended when Steve cheated on Traci, and Traci was trying to do right by her daughter by bringing her daughter back to Genoa City to start to develop a connection to her biological father, Brad. And now here John is urging Traci to knock it off because the whole thing is making Ashley unhappy. He was saying, why don't you move out, basically, for Ashley's sake? Why don't you sacrifice yourself and your daughter for Ashley's sake? And it is astounding to me now how I never picked up on any of this watching at the time. I really didn't. I don't know if it was because I was younger or if it's because it wasn't really played for... It wasn't in your face played the way that we see it, I think, today, but there was a subtle preferential treatment going on there that really, in retrospect, wasn't even so subtle. I think that Traci was loved very much by her family, but she was also the black sheep of the family. She didn't share the same connection to the rest of the Abbotts that the whole rest of the family did. And it is really apparent to me now that Traci's needs, Traci's desires, always came after Jack and Ashley's. Oh, it's heartbreaking. It really is. And I don't know why I didn't see it before. Was everybody else who was watching at the time seeing it before? Or is it something that we're just now really only able to see in retrospect? I'm not sure. But I, for one, say that now is Traci's time to shine. It's now. Like, by the time we got to the Christmas 2019 episode on Friday, Traci was the rock of the Abbott family. They were all looking to her for wisdom. How about that? Traci Abbott has come a long way, and I think that her character has come a long way with the fans, and maybe that's why we're more sensitive to her plight. I just love her, and I just want good things for her now, knowing what she's been through. And no, it's not the worst experience or worst family scenario that anyone in the world could ever have, but it is her plight. And they're her feelings, and it's very real. And so I want her to be happy moving forward. I'm excited to see her when the show returns. I would really like for someone to maybe adapt one of Traci's novels into a movie. And maybe make Traci a huge, huge star. I was so totally fascinated by alcoholic Nikki. Sneaking drinks at Traci's wedding in plain sight. Did she honestly think that Jack wouldn't notice her standing there openly with a glass of vodka in her hand when she promised him that she wouldn't do that? Oh, I could not keep my eyes off of Nikki and Jack. That was the real juicy drama of the wedding. And the dynamic between Jack and Nikki, and like the fact that they were having this marital fight at a public event, that felt so real to me. At a family event, no less. Ooh. Like, how many husbands have yanked their unhappy, drunk wives out of family events over the years? Oh, I could just feel their marriage tearing apart. And Nikki looked so wrecked. Even Jack made a comment prior to the wedding about how the liquor was starting to show on her. That's how he phrased it. That's starting to show on you, Nikki. And it was. I mean, even done up for the wedding, Nikki's makeup looked really dark and severe and even smeared a little bit. And her eyes, a lot of the time, were only half open. I mean, she looked like a supermodel still, but it was different from the softer Nikki that I've gotten used to seeing. The fight before the wedding and the fight after the wedding were both really good. I mean, it was just dialogue rich. It was character rich. I find, arguments like that and scenes like that to be far more compelling even than, if something exploded, like the big plot twist. Like, just those moments between Nikki and Jack before and after the wedding were golden to me. I am honestly surprised that Jack was still putting up with Nikki's antics in January of 1991, because the striptease that we saw that Nikki did for Victor at the ballroom we saw that episode a couple of weeks ago, that was June of 1990. So in June of 1990, Jack is standing there watching his wife do a little striptease for her ex-husband, and then January 1991, he's still putting up with it. I mean, 6 months had gone by, and Nikki was clearly still unhappy and trying to now drown her sorrows. Ugh. I think the marriage just needed to end sooner than it did, but Jack clearly loved her, or he wouldn't have put up with it as long as he did. From 1991, flash forward to 1999, and Nikki was yet again being very indignant with her family as Victoria catches Nikki canoodling with Brad Carlton, the man who had worked with Jack to take over Newman Enterprises while Victor was presumed dead, but he was really in New Mexico being held hostage. So Jack handing the paperwork for Jabot and returning it to the Abbott family, when he handed all of that over to John, that was the culmination of the story that we talked about during Rivals Week, when Victor took Jack and Brad's portrait down off the wall and he crushed it into a million pieces like a pencil. That happened, and then Jack got the company back. So do you remember when we talked about that a couple weeks ago? Victor's plane had gone down in the New Mexico mountains, and the guy who had found him then decided to hold him hostage, but a beautiful doctor, who we saw Victor taking a phone call from this week, helped him escape. That woman was Ramona. Now, Nikki was very insecure about Ramona. I mean, they were recently married, Nikki and Victor, but she was still very insecure about Ramona. So Nikki started trying to talk to Victor about having a baby as a way to kind of secure that relationship. And when he turned her down, Nikki just decided to go off and get involved with Brad Carlton, while Ashley swooped in and stole the prize. The prize sperm, that is. Oh, yes! Victor's prize sperm. It was smoking coming out of that vat of other sperms. I know that it was just cold and reacting to the warmer environment, but I'd like to believe that when the lab technician pulled Victor's sperm up out of the vat, it was on fire. That's how hot that sperm was. Ew! Ew, I'm sorry for saying that. Ew! Oh my goodness, gross. But the whole sperm sample thing is gross, and yet it is such a staple of daytime. I'm sure that all soaps have done a sperm switcheroo at some point, and Victor's sperm was juggled around a lot before it actually landed. Still so gross. So Diane Jenkins was the first person to get Victor's sperm. She stole it from that lab that we saw, and then Ashley, unbeknownst to Diane, stole it from her. And then Nikki switched out whatever sample that Diane had received with Jack's sperm, which was also apparently on file somewhere, of course. It was, and all of this was revealed like going back in time. Oh my goodness, it was a dangerous game too. So ultimately though, Diane, thanks to Nikki, ended up with Jack's sperm, which became Kyle. And then Ashley ended up with Victor's sperm, which became Abby. Oh my goodness. Thank goodness that Ashley didn't somehow end up with Jack's sperm in all of this. Ashley looked so happy and so healthy in 1999 as she was thanking Victor for agreeing to return Jabot to the Abbott family. And seeing her there so bright and so beautiful, it is hard to imagine her being so weird and desperate that she would want to steal Victor's sperm and have herself inseminated with it. Just when I think that Ashley she's so pristine, then I remember something like this that's so weird and desperate. And borderline crazy, honestly. I don't know. I guess she had her own goals. She had her own plans. All right. And Victor didn't even really seem to mind. Well, let's talk about this. Jack's plan to force Victor to give Jabot back to the Abbotts. Jack stole Newman so that Victor would return what he had stolen from the Abbott family. And Jack getting that company back, having it in family hands, that was about Jack. That was about Jack and his redemption. It was about his relationship with his father. And it was, to an extent, about the entire Abbott family. And I think that it had to have been such a treasured moment for Jack because he was the one who got tricked. He was the one who lost the family farm. And now here he is all these years later, finally being able to hand the company back to its founder, to its rightful owner, and to take it a step further and to ask now to run it together as a family, the way that John always dreamed. It was interesting to hear Jack offering that to John, saying, let's run it together, you and me and Ashley. Not Traci. Pretty sure she wasn't included in that. It was just me, you, and Ashley. I mean, Jack knew that that's what John wanted, and yet he went on years later to try to block Ashley from being involved in that company. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But at that time, what a wonderful gift. What a wonderful coup he was able to pull off. Because without Jabot, John was a little lost. He had apparently moved to New York, taking Billy with him. Now, that episode's Billy, that was my Billy. That's my favorite Billy. David Tom. Original adult Billy. Of course, he was kind of a teen. But that's my Billy. David Tom is Heather Tom's brother, and he was so cute. He was giving me the spoiled, rich, boarding school brat, with his crooked smile, giving me Corey Haim vibes all over the place. Don't make me get out my autographed picture of Corey Haim. I loved David Tom in that role, coming in there in his suit, seeming like he is just too big for Genoa City. Couldn't wait to get out of this podunk town. Unless there was a street, smart, sassy girl that could convince him to stay around. And we might be seeing a little bit more of that story next week, a little birdie told me. And so Billy did stay around, John stayed around, and John had been semi-retired after losing Jabot, but now Jack was standing there in front of his father, offering him the dream that had been stolen from him, that Jack had unwittingly played a part in, the dream of this actually being a family business. All those years of guilt that Jack had carried. I mean, I would like to say that the guilt was lifted that day, but I think it's still very clear that so much of Jack's feelings of inadequacy come from the fact that he felt like he was always standing in the shadows of a father that he admired. And that is still very much with him today. In the same way that Traci always felt like she couldn't measure up to Ashley, I think Jack was always feeling like he couldn't measure up to John. Only in Jack's case, he really couldn't. He really couldn't. Well, what a beautiful moment. I thought that it was such a beautiful speech as Jack was laying out what he had done for his father. And I just love Peter Bergman, and I love the way he has this very sentimental tone. I just think that Peter Bergman is right where he belongs, doing the job that he is doing. He is a fantastic actor. This was one of Jack's proudest moments, and I could just see his whole heart, his whole life, his whole self on display in that scene. Jack and Phyllis were one of my all-time favorite soap couples. I think partly it was because after tolerating Phyllis for all of those years with her crazy stunts and her vindictiveness and her insecurity, it felt equally as crazy to see Phyllis rise to the role of a leading lady and as a match for Jack. I think in a lot of ways, since we're kind of on an insecurity theme here, apparently, I think that Phyllis never believed that she was good enough for Jack, and that's why she ran out on his proposal at the Abbott pool party in front of everyone. Jack gave her an impromptu marriage proposal in front of his friends and his family, and she ran out. But can we just take a side note jaunt here? Y&R needs to bring back the Abbott pool house. That party looked so fun and so twinkly. I wanted to go. We need to bring back the Abbott pool house, and we need to give it to Theo. And Theo needs to throw some parties, like in the 1980s themed Halloween nightmares that we had. Yes! We need that Abbott pool house because it's also an outdoorsy area, but it belongs to the family. It's not, the only outdoorsy areas we have are the public parks so that everybody can use it. But this was like Abbott pool. I just got a sense of the Abbott house with that pool house and the pool. And it's so perfect for summer. Everything's bars and restaurants. Bring back the Abbott pool house. Okay, I'm done with my jaunt now. Oh, Jack and Phyllis. Red. I really wanted them to last. But I also think that Phyllis has a way of sabotaging herself. And I also think that Jack has a way of seeing what he wants to see. And only what he wants to see. Because there's no doubt in my mind that Phyllis was the love of Jack's life. I believe that. I think Phyllis was his great love. It was and always will be. But I don't think that she ever quite felt the same way about him. I think Phyllis loved Jack, but I don't think that it was as deep as Jack loved her. Maybe that's going to be a controversial opinion, but that is how I feel. I felt that Jack's proposal was so moving. And I could feel Phyllis getting in her own way. And it was very romantic, but I think her hesitation was because she knew it wasn't going to last. But Jack was so compelling with his argument. I mean, he was giving her the very best proposal pitch that he could and being the very best sentimental Jack Abbott that he could be. But it's just tragic that they didn't work out, and I guess it was always going to be that way. I'm surprised that Y&R did not include that particular episode in a week themed wedding proposals. Why was it in the Abbott family week and not in a wedding proposal week? Or perhaps a week of romance? Knowing what I know now, if I were Paul, I would never take a glass of wine offered to me by Isabella Brania. Because if she would have spiked that pre-opened bottle of wine, which we now know she was apt to do, Paul would have been dead on the floor for as much of it that he drank. I mean, I think this really, the way Paul was downing the wine, it really speaks to how deeply he loved Chris. Because if another woman could show up in front of you wearing that incredibly sexy teal lingerie number like hot and spicy sex kitten Isabella was wearing, and you have to drink practically an entire bottle of wine just to get through having sex with her, well then I guess that Paul just prefers bugs to sex kittens. I guess. Oh my goodness. Gosh, that scene. I could be wrong, but I want to say that Isabella and Paul had sex that night in the year 2000, and she got pregnant with little Ricky on the spot. I think also that Paul just felt guilty for being attracted to Isabella, as if any man wouldn't be attracted to Isabella, but he was still with Chris. But at the same time, Isabella was brought to town by Michael specifically and intentionally to cause that marriage to crumble. I mean, Paul never really had a chance. Paul and Isabella, I think she came to town because she was having some kind of trouble with her ex-husband, and he was working on a case for her, and they started to get very close while he was working on her case, and she was also actively trying to seduce him. I mean, they're working closely together. She's a total beauty queen, tasked with making him fall in love with her. And he didn't really fall in love with her, but he did fall for it. I mean, he only married her because she got pregnant. He decided he wanted to be a father, and he decided to marry her. But even after she got pregnant and Paul married her, he always had one eye on Christine. And that drove Isabella so crazy that it drove her crazy. At first, when I saw that Thursday's show was John's funeral episode from 2006, I was actually really disappointed because I've been talking for weeks now about how egregious it is that Y&R would dare kill off the character of John Abbott. And so on Thursday I was thinking, ugh, this episode is going to be a real bummer. I don't even want to see it. But I had completely forgotten how deep and how dramatic this episode was. I mean, the emotions were so heightened. I mean, everyone was an open wound. And it was not even just about mourning John. It was about who he left behind. At the funeral, everybody stood next to the obligatory funeral portrait of John Abbott, and one by one they all took the podium and they talked about the impression that John had made on their lives, and each person had a flashback of a significant moment with him. And every single one of those people who were there, I felt their pain. I thought everyone's pain was so raw and so real. And I remember John fondly, and I felt that it was so raw and so real. And when Jack took the podium and he was talking and he started to choke up and he said to the crowd, "My name is John Abbott Jr. My family calls me Jack." I was in tears. Absolute tears, because I know how much Jack loves his father. Now, mind you, I completely assumed that for dramatic purposes, Gloria was going to come walking into that chapel, probably in the middle of Jack's speech, and she would cause a ruckus somehow. But halfway through listening to Jack's speech, I thought to myself, oh, wait a minute. Where is Gloria? Jack's speech is almost done. Gloria asked Michael to keep an eye on the time in the previous scene. The Baldwins would never be late for this. Knowing Michael, he would never let Gloria be late for this. And so, what's going on? Jack's speech is concluding. Wait a minute. Oh, no, he didn't. Oh, no, he didn't. Oh, yes, he did. He did. Jack. At the beginning of the episode, Ashley had mentioned that Jack had given Gloria a little bit of kindness. He was being unusually kind to Gloria the day prior. He had even given her an embrace. And now it was all making sense. Jack was being kind to Gloria. Jack was embracing Gloria just so that he could plunge the knife deep in her back. He intentionally told her the wrong time so that she would miss her own husband's funeral. It is hard to imagine anything more cruel than that. I think that Jack's cruelty toward Gloria was equal to his love of his father. I think Jack loved his father deeply, and that's how much he hated Gloria. He blamed Gloria for his father's death, and he was going to do anything that he could to betray her, to screw her over. And how the hell did he even pull this one off? Usually you have the church service and then the pallbearers carry the casket to the hearse and then the family would follow it to the cemetery. But John's casket was still at the church when Gloria and the Baldwin family arrived. So what did Jack say to the minister and to the church? Did he just say, just leave the body, we'll come back for it later? It's awful. It's one of the most awful things that I think I've ever seen on Y&R. And my heart just ached for Gloria. I just ached for her standing there trying so hard to maintain her dignity, clutching on to that crumpled up speech in her hand. I mean, she probably spent hours and hours writing that speech. And in the end, it became nothing more than a wad of wet paper in her hand. Oh my goodness. But I have to hand it to her. She refused to let Jack take this moment away from her no matter what. She was going to say her piece for the man that she loved truly and deeply. And she did. She stood up there and she talked, and it was from the heart, and it had nothing to do with her pre-prepared speech. She just talked about the man that she loved. Oh my goodness. Jack purposefully excluding Gloria from the funeral was such a petty and childish move, and it was classic Jack Abbott of that era. It's one of the reasons why he will never measure up to the grand man, the grandfather that he sees in his vision. He will never be that man. He will never be John Abbott. But it's also this, it's one of the reasons why it makes him such a compelling soap opera character. That he could be so petty and so childish and so jealous that John was giving affection to someone like Gloria when he wanted it all for himself. He was incredibly devious. I mean, just before John's death, Jack also coerced John into changing his will so that Gloria got nothing. Oh my goodness. That was the end of Thursday's episode, was just Jack and Gloria spitting fire back and forth with one another. It was so good. So good. I thought this episode was going to be a bummer, and in the end it was so good. Best episode of the week, I would have to say. Oh my goodness. Jack versus Gloria. And it's hard to think that, you know, with all of the hatred that was between them there, it eventually exploded into a naughty little secret fling. Years and years later, but just a couple years ago, a naughty little secret fling. Why not? Jack loves sleeping with his father's ex-wives. Merry Christmas, everybody! In June. Friday ended on Christmas. You know, after taking this journey of Y&R through the decades, it was really jarring to be plopped back into an episode from 2019 just 6 months ago. How did it measure up for you? I mean, I think that Dina's Christmas miracle was a very wonderful moment. Fen returning home for the holidays was a wonderful moment. It was a good episode. But I couldn't help but notice the gap between what I would define as a good episode in 1999 versus what I would define as a good episode in 2019. They seemed different. There seemed like some space between them. It is different. There's no two ways around it. Maybe I'm just getting spoiled on the classics, but the 2019 episode, although I think it's good, I thought it was good at the time, it just also stuck out to me as missing the depth and the breadth of the classic soap opera era shows. I mean, even, putting me through the 80s and the 90s, those good episodes were good episodes. This one was a good episode. It's a good episode. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but I couldn't help but notice. After having been on this journey with all of these classics, the Abbott family Christmas party in 2019 was taking place in a restaurant, not in a home. Kyle and Lola were spending their first Christmas together. They had just had an epic romance and a wedding, but then they were divorced after just a few months. Billy was having his midlife crisis and an emotional affair, and it just strikes me that in a week-themed The Abbott Family, the shows in 2019 aren't as much about family. I don't have as much of a sense of family. I think that the show is just so different now, and it has different priorities now, and I probably never would have noticed if I now didn't have other decades to compare it to. So, I would like to ask you this. What is the best decade of Y&R? That's this week's poll question. What is the best decade of Y&R? 70s, 80s, 90s, the 2000s, or the 2010s? I think that's a really interesting poll question. If you would like to go to yrchat.com and tell me what you think the best decade of Y&R has been. And for bonus points, does your choice for best decade match up with the decade that you started watching in? I often think about an observation made by the great comedian Dana Gould, who also went on to become the head writer for The Simpsons in the early to mid 2000s. And he once said that people would often come up to him and say to him that the show is just not as good as it used to be. And Dana started to notice that the years that the fans seemed to have the most affection for were the years when they first started watching. Now, The Simpsons has a 30-year-long show run, so I think when there are not a lot of shows that have decades of runtime. So I think it's a fair comparison to Y&R's long show run of 45 years. And I think it's a very interesting point that fans can connect with the show so deeply that they initially feel this incredible loyalty to it, but sometimes maybe we stick around a little longer than we should. Like the evolution of a show and the evolution of the individual are not necessarily on the same path. And sometimes the path can weave back and forth. I'm going to vote that I think that the 90s were the best decade of Y&R. And yes, that's the decade that I started watching in. It's the decade that I'm the most familiar with. It's true. It really is true. But I'll also say, by the way, that the 70s and the 80s, what little we've seen of them in these classic episodes, those have been more compelling to me while watching the classics. I mean, anything 70s, 80s, and 90s has mostly been more appealing to me. And on that note, we actually are going to get an 80s episode on Monday. In fact, this might even, I think Victor and Nikki's courtship is the earliest episode we've seen in the classics. But this one might be right behind. I think this might be the second oldest one that we've seen. 1986. Victor romances Ashley to kick off Romance Week, also known as Every Week in soap operas. But okay. Ashley and Victor, Nick and Sharon, Billy and Mac, Kevin and Chloe, Lily and Kane. Those are our big romances for Romance Week. Romance Week, huh? I don't know. I kind of keep thinking maybe we're getting a little loose on these themes, but all right, I'll take it. Romance week, count me in. Well, we may not have to be counted in for too much longer because good news! I am hearing from multiple sources this week that soaps will be returning to production soon. Like possibly in the next couple weeks. Oh my goodness. I may hit the roof. It sounds like our soap stars are being told to get tested and then to get ready for their close-ups, because I saw that Eric Braden posted a picture that was like a before and after picture of his quarantine hair. The before picture, he had like really long crazy hair, and then they had the after picture where it was all nice and styled back and he was looking like Victor Newman. So that tells me that the actors know that they are on call and they just need to be ready for whatever comes next. Studios have been given the green light to gear back up with some extra precautions, of course. And now that I think about it, we've been talking about this for a couple weeks and where the story will be when we pick back up. I bet some stories have to be rewritten. I mean, considering there are all of these new regulations now, some stuff has got to change. At least it's got to be tweaked. I do not know how on earth they would ever be able to stay 6 feet apart for any of these scenes. 6 feet is a pretty good distance. I just don't know how they would do it. And honestly, I doubt they will. I don't know. I just think that there may be some more limited physical contact, but I don't think the 6 feet thing is happening. And I don't think the masks are going to be happening either. I mean, they may be wearing masks in between takes or something, but there ain't going to be no masks. Unless somebody in the makeup department decides to get creative and paint some nose and some mouth on people's masks. I don't think so. Let's hope not anyway. But I think I might accept it at this point if it means getting new episodes. Because even though the classics are totally my cup of tea, and honestly, I'm enjoying these flashbacks, I feel, to me, not an overall because I can't talk for everybody, but to me, I'm feeling like these classic episodes are better overall solid episodes than the newer ones. But you cannot count out the newness and the freshness. I think that there is always going to be something to be said for a new daily episode that you get the sense that, oh, it's happening and you're experiencing it at the same time with other fans of the show. I mean, the newness factor cannot be downplayed, for sure. I just still really hope that the current writers have some takeaways from these classic episodes, because there's a lot to be learned there. And also, I think I'm just feeling ready, though, to get back to some normal. I mean, a lot of old episodes you can watch on YouTube. I mean, anybody can deep dive into YouTube and get some classics, but all of this hopping around all week, like week to week, decade to decade, story to story, it's starting to give me a little bit of whiplash. I'm starting to feel like I just need to hop on one single continuity and just go with the drain. Bravo! Give the lady a prize. That was our very sneaky quote from last week, but I'm actually pretty surprised that as many of you guessed it as did. Anna, Jamie, Daisy, Justin, Henry, Victoria, Ambreen, Tony, and Tara all guessed correctly that it was Isabella. Bravo, give the lady a prize. I picked that quote intentionally because I thought everyone's gonna think that Sarah Smythe said this. Because of the carnival episode. Prize sounds like carnival, and I figured everybody was going to guess Sarah Smythe. But no, it was Isabella. She was saying that to Christine as she was forcing Christine to participate, as she was unveiling her master plan. She was like letting Chris guess what happened next. And when Chris guessed correctly, she said, bravo, give the lady a prize. How about a kind of keeping on the playful theme from last week? Here's our quote for this week. Who said it? The playground is closed. I'm liking this. Carnivals, playgrounds, prizes. It works for me. But who said it? Do you know? the playground is closed. If you think you know, you can go to yrchat.com to leave your guess. And if you get it right, bravo! I will give the ladies and gents a prize. Our poll question for last week is a little bit surprising to me, to be honest. Well, first of all, this part isn't surprising. The number one top villain of Villains Week, as voted by Y&R Chatters, was Sheila Carter. So Sheila got the number one place, which actually, I guess maybe it is a little surprising considering that Sheila was really only in 2 brief scenes and yet she still took the lead. I feel like maybe people were just seeing her as the overall favorite villain. I don't know. She just wasn't in the Villains Week enough for me to vote for her. Although, by the way, I did happen to catch her on, I want to say it was Monday's episode of Bold and the Beautiful when she was holding a gun on the entire Forrester family. Oh, that was so good. She was so good. Sheila was so good. Second place is what really gets me here. Oh my goodness. The second place of the favorite villain of Villains Week is Isabella. See, she would have been my least favorite. I guess I was very rude to have sort of dismissed her. But apparently you guys were really loving her. So wow. I mean, right behind Sheila, Isabella Brania. And then we have David Kimball in third place. Then we have Sarah Smythe, tied with Kevin Fisher, bringing up the rear. People weren't loving the Sarah Smythe or the Kevin Fisher quite as much. I voted David Kimball. You know, I was really loving that storyline. That was fascinating to me, maybe because it felt new. And I'm sort of yearning for some new. But Anna says, I liked Isabella back then. And then again, I love Ava Longoria in Desperate Housewives. It was one of my favorite shows of all time, and I really loved her the second time around. You know, Desperate Housewives would be something really good to go back and watch. I think I watched maybe the first season of it, but it's not real fresh in my mind. I think I probably watched it because of Ava Longoria. That was my inroad. That might be a good one to go back and rewatch. Well, hey, speaking of these classic episodes and sort of feeling maybe a little bit of fatigue, just sort of wanting some newness, Jana says, I'm glad to see some of the classic episodes, but some of the less significant scenes with characters I either never knew or don't remember are a little confusing. I really wish that CBS would choose a classic storyline or romance or whatever and cut multiple scenes from it together to make a cohesive story for each theme week. For example, I would have loved to have seen more of the David Kimball story. I read about it, but I've never seen it, and seeing more than the end would have been interesting. Obviously, we still wouldn't be able to see all of it, especially as slow-moving as the stories were back then, but it would make more sense. And this way, it's much less effort. I feel like, though, they're not aiming for new viewers right now. They're just trying to hang on to the ones they already have. Yes. I think so, too. I think that a better way to approach these would be to edit. But as you say, I think that is a lot of work, and that's exactly why they're not doing it. But you think they're not trying to get new viewers right now. They're just trying to hang on to the ones they have. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably is also about what they have the budgets and the time to put together, because going back in and editing all that footage, I mean, editing just takes a whole heck of a lot longer than I ever would have imagined. When they go back, when they're doing a regular new episode, they have a script. They kind of, I think probably, they have a system for how they are going to edit the whole episode, but going back through tons of old content and editing them together would be really, really difficult, and that's why they're not doing it. But where it's suffering is that, as you said, it's just really confusing sometimes. I mean, you're just going back, I'm in the 80s, now I'm in the 2000s. I mean, and every week it's just hip-hopping around, and I definitely think that's what's making me want my new episodes most of all. Not that the classics aren't good, but I am trying to fill in a lot of the blanks on, you know, the lesser characters, or the characters who aren't main to the theme. I've been trying to fill in some of those stories, which is fun and interesting. I mean, it's more work. And there are some days and some weeks where I'm like exhausted by it, but at the same time, I feel like I know so much more about Y&R than I ever did before. I mean, I consider myself having pretty good knowledge of the show, but I mean, you can't possibly remember it all. So going back and researching it all is definitely putting it more forefront in my brain and making me feel like I'm a little bit more of a Y&R expert. Oh, it will be nice, though, just to sit back and be mindless for the new episodes. Because, again, when I'm watching new episodes, the only thing I have to think about is my opinion. I don't have to seek out what happened. I mean, I know. I've been watching. If I saw last week's show, I'm good for this week. So, yeah, it's a little more easy breezy to just get those new ups. Oh, well, about the newer eps, Victoria says, I remember when that Christmas episode aired this past December. I thought, how wonderful to see Michael, Lauren, Fenn, and Ashley. I'd missed seeing them on my screen. One of the perks with older episodes is that they are more present and relevant. I think maybe you mean newer episodes are more present and relevant. Yes. And also, I have to say, seeing Michael and Lauren and Fenn and Abby and Billy, it's like, oh gosh, I forgot them. Like, we've been so entrenched in these classics for so long. There was something very startling at first about seeing anything that even resembled a newer episode. I think that, what was the newest we had gotten to? Maybe 2009? But we haven't seen anything, I don't think, from the 2010s. So we were dropped back into that this week with the 2019 Christmas episode, and I definitely did have a sense of like, new. This is new. I don't know what to do with it. And I was excited at first, but there definitely was a point where I thought, this isn't as good as a classic. I like my classics. Maybe, it's just a lot of it boils down to I just have had trouble getting on board with this particular writer. Basically, I have not missed having to complain about old Josh Griffith. He's probably not missed having to deal with my complaints, which he doesn't. In any way. But yeah, there was a part of me that just, yeah. I prefer that. I think in some ways I do prefer the classic era to where this guy's got us right now. But I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that he's taken some notes. Here's a good example. Ellen says, no, Kyle and Lola. Stop all that smiling and laughing and hugging right this instant. You two are supposedly in a loveless marriage. Kyle cares only for his childhood pals / ex, Summer. Your romance and marriage is a big lie. We see you, Y&R writers. You changed your mind midstream again. Poor Michael Mealor can't get a consistent story to save his life. That's it right there. And I think it was seeing Kyle and Lo that really ticked me off, seeing the newer episode. Because seeing how happy they were and knowing that the writers just switched it midstream and said, nope, Kyle loves Summer. It was always Summer. He was forcing himself into that relationship with Lola. Yes, that made me mad at the current writers. Like, I'm going back and watching the classics and I don't even have to talk about or think about the writers other than to compliment them. Like, I don't want the writers to be this close up in my consciousness. I shouldn't have to think about it. Like, the stories definitely they took longer, but some things require time. Relationships require time. Marriages and divorces should require some time, especially when you whip the audience up into this great wedding with bubbles, and then you just say, no, it was never true. Okay. I'm bringing it back. If soaps are going back into production, then by this time next month, who knows, I may be able to just complain about Josh some more. But for now, I need to take my vacation from complaining about stuff like that. But Ellen, you got me fired up. Because I agree so strongly. Kyle and Lola, I thought were really cute. They had a lot of potential that was just dashed. And again, I like Kyle and Summer too, and I could have got on board, but I would have needed a little time. T. Nicole says, it was so bittersweet seeing an episode with Kyle and Lola. I loved them together, and I felt Lola brought out such an adorable side of Kyle compared to Summer. Not that I dislike Summer, but I've always been Team Lola and Kyle. I am still hoping that they will get back together. I enjoyed the episode to being transported back to a time when they were so in love, but it was sad knowing that when we go back to regular episodes, they're not currently together. I now know what I want. A Kyle and Lola week. And if Y&R gives me that, then I'm all for a week of the history of Adam, featuring all the actors who played the character. Again, like I said, though, I really feel like they're getting kind of loose with these themes. Romance week? Really? I mean, okay. But really? Oh. Victoria says, I loved the tete-a-tete between Mrs. C and Dina. They looked like grand dames sitting on their upholstered thrones, discussing the lives of others. Mrs. C was so animated and joyful, and Dina looked so regal yet fresh-faced. It was a pleasure to watch them plot Jill's downfall. What a well-written comment, Victoria. Oh, I so agree. Hey, Superplex mentions the end of that Traci and Brad wedding episode where Jack is right there, always missing his mother. Yes, Superplex. The very end of that scene was Jack always missing his mother, even when she was standing right there. Yeah, Gary says, notice Jack finding contentment in the arms of his mother, that he always felt abandoned and betrayed him. And at the wedding, he was there with her just as he was eyeballing Nikki across the room, guzzling vodka, embarrassing him, as he had emphatically told her not to do. Yeah, because knowing the journey that Jack's relationship with Dina has taken, and then seeing him there kind of snuggling up with her, yeah, that was very, very notable to look back upon. Mary Ann V says, my favorite episode of the week was John's funeral. Everyone spoke beautifully from the heart. But it was wrong of Jack to give Gloria the wrong time, and she missed her husband's funeral. I felt so bad for her. She really loved John, and he loved her. John's family should have given her the respect that John did while he was alive. Great acting, though. Big head shake, yes. What was done was awful, but the acting was good. Superplex says, Thursday's episode, the funeral episode, is proof of what little regard the Abbotts have for Gloria and her feelings. What reason did Jack have in placing all the blame of what happened between Tom Fisher and his father on Gloria? This is the equivalent to blaming Michael for what Kevin tried to do to Colleen. Just because Gloria made the bad decision to marry Mr. Fisher does not mean that henceforth every single act of malfeasance he commits should be pinned on her. Yes. Yes, Superplex also goes on to say, I think it's important to also realize that Gloria was unaware at the time of her marriage to John that she was still technically married to Tom. Just as Jack insisted repeatedly to Ashley that she was, in every other sense, a true Abbott, regardless of her actual paternity, Gloria's marriage to John was just as authentic as if she was legally divorced from Tom. Ooh. Gosh, that's a strong, strong point, Superplex. I totally agree. And I really like that you're bringing up that little nugget of truth here, too, that Gloria didn't know she was still married to Tom. It's not as if she was running from a lie. Or if she was, no, let me rephrase. It's not as if she was actively trying to lie to John about it, to dupe him into a marriage or something. She didn't know. I think that John and Gloria were already married, had already gone through their ceremony when Tom came back and had the revelation that the marriage was invalid because he and Gloria were still married, which I think maybe happened twice even. No, maybe I think that happened after. I think that's how Jack somehow got Gloria booted out of the will. I don't know. I should have looked that up. There's so many little details that went into it. And what was he saying? He was saying something. Jack was saying something where to Gloria in that scene where he was also very resentful about the decision-making process at John's end of life. Jack was somehow implying that Gloria was not following through with John's wishes. To the best of my knowledge, the Abbott children were the ones who wanted to take John off of life support, but Gloria didn't want to. So I think that John also was resentful that Gloria was trying to block a follow-through of what John's wishes were. But again, I think she loved her husband. She didn't want to let him go. I think that's very natural and probably a very common emotion attached to such a horrible decision. Leslie says, John Abbott was not a great father. How horrible to say to Traci, do you realize the toll that this is taking on Ashley's happiness? Expecting Traci to put Ashley's happiness above her own daughter, Colleen's? And Traci wanted to talk to Jack and Phyllis, and Traci wanted to talk about Jack and Phyllis, but no. John's concern was his beauty Ashley. To heck with Jack or Traci if it's not perfect in Ashley's world. We can't use the excuse of overcompensating for Ashley not being his biologically, because he had no idea. But I kind of wish that he would have found out after yesterday's episode. Haha, John, your favorite isn't even yours. Ooh. Gary says, with all the Ashley, my beauty shtick coming down on Traci unknowingly by her father, now this. Move aside and don't mess with daughter number one's happiness. So many scenes would be written differently today with the newer cultural awareness. Oh, that's interesting, because it sounds from this comment, Gary, that you also weren't fully aware that of just how unfair this was for Traci. It's just something that I never thought about. And so maybe it just is an evolution of a cultural awareness that makes us able to better see it in retrospect. I'm not entirely sure. But yes, I certainly do agree that it was unfair. Marianne V says, John loved all his children, but Ashley was his beauty and was his favorite by far. How he gushed around her. It was especially hard on Traci, who never thought she could live up to Ashley in her father's eyes, and it made her insecure about herself. But Traci did become an accomplished author. She could have used her daughter Colleen around, but she was killed off, and that left Traci alone to deal with her insecurities. Yeah, it's so true. Ashley was John's favorite. Jack was Dina's favorite. And where does that leave Traci? Pretty much nowhere. You're right, she could have used her daughter with her. Diana says, the actress playing Traci's daughter Colleen this week looks a lot like Traci. I was not watching at this time, so I've never seen her before. I think Y&R made a good choice with casting this actress. Her eyes are shaped like Traci's, and her nose was quite similar. She's a pretty girl and seems to be a good actress. She's very believable as Traci's little offspring. I can't say the same for the actor who played Billy on the same episode. I didn't find the actor very engaging, and he was too bland for my liking. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, Diana. Oh, my goodness, yes. Well, now, Jana responded saying that it was Lindsay Fonseca is the actress who was playing Colleen. But that's not right. I don't know the name of the actress who was playing where Diana is referring to, because Lindsay Fonseca was the original teen Colleen, and Jana says she was by far the best Colleen. Then came the recasts, if I recall correctly, and the Sony was quite insistent on Tamsin Sursock, and most viewers didn't care for her. However, killing her off wasn't the answer to a casting error. Okay, there were 3 Colleens. Lindsay was number 1. Then there was the one in the middle, which I will look up in a second. And then there was Tamron, the final Colleen who died. I think the one Diana was referring to that looked a lot like Traci was that middle one who I need to get her name. But my favorite Colleen, Jana, also is Lindsay. I thought she was excellent. She was so cute. She's the one I think that started up the relationship with JT. Now, the Tamron Susak, the final Colleen, didn't really bother me that much. I had no problem with her. The middle one was my least favorite, actually. The one, Diana, that you thought looked much like Traci. I don't know. She just didn't have a whole lot of anything to her personality. I didn't think there was just something about her that didn't quite gel with me. Tamron, again, or what's it again? She has a unique name. Tamsin. She, I thought, did a very good job in the role, but yeah, I think viewers didn't quite connect. Cannot believe that they just chose to kill her. Cannot believe it. And it was right after they killed Brad. They just went ba-boom, ba-boom. I mean, I think they even died at the same lake. Brad got trapped under the ice, and Colleen drowned in the water. That is so dark. Again, Traci's been through so much. That is so dark. That was a bad move. Marianne V says, I liked that Colleen. She was very good. But that Billy, I didn't even remember him. He was not a good Billy. I don't think he was around that long. No, I don't think he was either. I was like, the second that Colleen started calling him Billy, I was like, clunk. Who's this guy? I don't remember him at all. It's hard. I shouldn't be unfair. I don't want to speak to whether or not he was any good because it was only one episode and I have zero memory of him. I mean, he might as well have been an alien dropped onto the set. I don't remember him at all, but I don't think he lasted very long. Obviously. I mean, he wasn't, you can't really get used to anybody after seeing him in one single episode, but from the one single episode, definitely I wasn't getting any of the charm. I got a sense of Billy feeling like he also didn't belong in the Abbott family because he was a son of John Abbott who we didn't really have as strong of a relationship with. He's the son of this really great man that everyone is mourning, but yet he didn't share that really deep connection because he's the youngest child, and I think because Jill had him in boarding school for all of those years, and Jill was kind of the outcast wife, so I think that Billy also has that sense of not belonging in the Abbott family, which was apparent, whoever the actor would have been, in the writing of that episode with John's funeral. Oh, here's another one for you. Get this. Okay, Astra says, I recently found a podcast called A Trip Down Soap Lane, where a guy goes over the history of different soaps. When he got to Y&R, he mentioned Jill and some of the actresses that played her. I did not realize that there were a couple of recasts in between Brenda and Jess, but what shocked me more is when I looked it up, I noticed that Judith Chapman, aka Gloria, played Jill in 1994. From what I looked up, she maybe only played her for one episode or two while Jess was out sick. I was watching then, but I don't remember this at all. Does anybody remember this? Astra, when I saw this comment, my first thought was, nuh-uh, no way. Judith Chapman never played Jill. I don't believe it. And so I went to the Wikipedia. You're right. What? who plays Gloria, Judith Chapman, played Jill in 1994? I was definitely watching in 1994. Again, no memory of this. But that's another thing that soaps kind of used to do. I mean, they used to cast people in more than one role on a show. If there was enough time that had gone by, you didn't really, it's fine. It wasn't a big deal. But I don't remember this at all. I mean, it had to have been only for a couple of episodes, right? But wow, how that came back around. Judith Chapman must have some relationship with Sony or with the people in charge at Y&R, because wow, I mean, she played that Jill role. It must not have landed, but boy, did she get a nice role of Gloria years later. I would love to see more Gloria. She's not the original Gloria, though, either, you do know. Joan Van Ark originated the role of Gloria. But I tell ya, Judith Chapman darn well made it her own. Well, looking forward to next week. Ellen says, next week is Romance Week. Wait, what? No Adam and Sharon? Shaddam was epic. They loved each other without judging each other. And there are some expensive location-based episodes that they could use. New Orleans, I think? Again, I protest. Oh well, at least Allie will get a well-deserved romantic dose of handsome, dashing Kane Ashby. That's something to look forward to in the lineup for sure. My thoughts exactly, Ellen. When I heard Romance Week, I honestly did think Sharon and Adam got to be in there. We're gonna get the Adam episode that we have not gotten in 2 months. We haven't seen a glimpse of Adam in 2 months. This is gonna be it. Shaddam. I mean, honestly, I think that Adam and Sharon's romance, although it was shorter lived, it was every bit as compelling as Nick and Sharon's romance. And I'm a big Nick and Sharon fan. So it's really surprising that that wasn't in there. I don't know if it's because they didn't want to do 2 Sharon episodes or if there is just something weird going on with the lack of Adam. But you're right. I guess I will just have to settle for a day's dose of handsome, dashing Kane Ashby. Poor me. I think all of these classic episodes and all of this jumping around, it's given me whiplash, and I think it's making me a little loopy. You would not believe how much time I spend researching Y&R every day. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm on Y&R's Wikipedia. Not the Wikipedia.com one. It's like .wiki.com for The Young and the Restless. It's like The Young and the Restless.wiki.com or something. And it's way better than the Wikipedia because it's just more fleshed out. There's a lot of data in there. I'm on it for like an hour a day. Just trying to research everything that's gone on and put it into the timeline in my brain, and it is exhausting. I wake up in the morning, I have my cup of coffee, and I'm on that Y&R Wikipedia for an hour every day. It's getting ridiculous, but I really feel like I'm becoming a little Y&R historian here. I feel like maybe these classic episode Y&R chats, the Y&R chats about the classic episodes can go in a time capsule or something too, because it's a good way to remember the stories as a whole and how it related to the modern era of soap. So I'm putting in a lot of effort. A lot of extra effort, but I'm also really proud of the result. I hope that you guys are enjoying it and that Y&R Chat is making a good companion for you for all of these confusing classic episodes where we're jumping around every day of the week. That's my hope anyway. Oh my goodness. I think that I might need to take a nap. But I think that you need to go to yrchat.com to leave me your comments for the week. It is wonderful to hear from you guys. It is wonderful to see and hear your impressions of the show from decades past. And I hope that you not only vote in the best decade of Y&R poll, but I hope that you tell me if that correlates to the decade that you started watching the show, because that's going to help kind of fill in some it's going to back up this theory that I heard from Dana Gould, and I think it's very real. I think it's very possible. So I would love to see your comments about the decade that's best, the decade you started watching in, and also why you think that it's the best decade of the show. And I will take a look at those comments, and I'll bring those back to you next week, and we'll have a little chat about it. Okay? Sounds good to me. I love you guys, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye!